The most widely produced sniper rifle in history is built around a cartridge that was designed in 1891. Not adapted from it, built around it. The rifle was adopted by the Soviet Army on July 3, 1963. It serves in more than 30 countries today, and the round it fires, the 7.62 by 54 mm rimmed, first entered service under the Tsar, before powered flight, before the Soviet Union that would make the weapon famous, had been imagined into existence. That cartridge is older than the rifle by 72 years. It is older than the country that built the rifle. And it is still being loaded right now into a design that half the armies on Earth keep insisting they are about to retire. This is the Dragunov. And this is not really the story of a great sniper rifle, because by the standards of a Western sniper rifle, it is not one. It is the story of a weapon that was never built to be the best. It was built to be everywhere. It succeeded so completely that 60 years later, no one has been able to make it go away. The man who built it did not, by reputation, build weapons of war at all. Yevgeny Fyodorovich Dragunov was born on February 20, 1920, in Izhevsk, a city in the Urals that had forged arms for the Russian state since the age of Napoleon. He came from a family of gunsmiths, trained first as a factory machinist, and entered military service in 1939. Through the Great Patriotic War, he served as a senior armorer, repairing the rifles that came back from the front and studying the captured and enemy weapons that came back with them, learning firearms not from the drawing board, but from the inside. After 1945, he returned to the Izhevsk machine building plant and joined its Arms Design Bureau. And there he built his name on precision, not on war. He built Tut rifles. In 1949, he produced one of the first Soviet small-bore target rifles ever to reach series production, and that same year he built a sniper rifle called the MS-74, a modernized Mosin chambered in that same 7.62 by 54 mm rimmed round, reworked for better accuracy and faster reloading. Through the 1950s, the sporting rifles kept coming, including a biathlon rifle refined for the peculiar torture of shooting straight with a heart hammering from the cross-country track. One of his competition designs helped Soviet athletes take Olympic gold. This was a man who understood accuracy as a craft, who thought in barrel harmonics and trigger weights, and the thousand small tolerances that separate a rifle that hits from one that merely fires. What the world saw when it looked at him was a sportsman. Then the Red Army handed him a problem that only that kind of mind could solve. And it was not really about a rifle at all. It was about a gap. After the Second World War, the Soviets had rebuilt their infantry around a new intermediate cartridge, the 7.62 by 39 mm, the round of the AK and the SKS. Superb inside 300 meters and fading fast beyond it. That was a deliberate trade. Shorter reach in exchange for controllable automatic fire in the hands of every ordinary soldier. But in 1954, NATO standardized a full-power round, the 7.62 by 51 mm, and on open ground the math turned against the Soviet squad. A NATO machine gun team or an anti-tank crew could sit out past the range of the squad's light machine gun, the RPD, and work in safety, while the men with Kalashnikovs could not reach far enough to answer them. The cartridge that made the squad lethal up close had left a hole in its reach. Something had to fill that hole. Around 1957 and 1958, the Soviet military issued a specification, and the requirements were unusual. They did not ask for a classic sniper rifle. They asked for a scoped semi-automatic rifle that a single trained soldier could carry inside an ordinary squad, that could put accurate fire on a man out to 600 meters, that weighed almost nothing more than an AK, and that chambered the old full-power round the Army had been manufacturing without interruption since 1891. That round, the 7.62 by 54 mm rimmed, was not up for negotiation. It was the fixed point. Every designer who entered had to build his rifle around it. 3 ordnance engineers answered the call, and Dragunov was the youngest and, on paper, the least likely of them. Against him stood Sergei Simonov, the veteran who had given the Red Army the SKS carbine, whose entry was in essence a scaled-up SKS. Against him stood Alexander Konstantinov, whose rifle was simpler and cheaper to build. The prototypes went into extended field trials across a punishing spread of conditions: heat and dust and deep cold. Simonov's design was rejected in April 1960. Konstantinov's was cheaper, but it proved less accurate, less durable, and less reliable than the entry from the Sportsman. On paper, the Sportsman should not have won. And there was a fourth entry in the running, from a name that would one day eclipse all of theirs, and it had come in lighter than his. In 1963, Dragunov's rifle won. It was accepted into service on July 3rd under the designation SVD, the Sniperskaya Vintovka Systemy Dragunova, the sniper rifle of the system of Dragunov, model of the year 1963. A first batch of just 200 rifles was assembled for evaluation, and from 1964 serial production began at Izhmash. The plant later absorbed into the Kalashnikov concern. The fourth entry, the light one that had lost on accuracy, is the detail most retellings leave out. It had come from Mikhail Kalashnikov, the man whose name is stamped on more rifles than any other in human history, entered with a marksman's rifle that borrowed heavily from his own AK and RPK. And it was set aside because its shot spread too wide to meet the requirement. The maker of Olympic target guns had beaten the maker of the Kalashnikov at the one thing the Kalashnikov was never built to do. A sportsman had outshot the most famous gun designer alive. The only question left was whether his elegant, accurate rifle could survive being handed to a conscript army. What Dragunov had built was a careful stack of compromises wearing the shape of a rifle. It was gas-operated, but where the AK drives a long-stroke piston through its entire violent cycle, the SVD used a short-stroke piston that gave a brief shove and let the carrier travel on its own, keeping the hammering of the action away from the barrel, where accuracy lives. It locked with a 3-lug rotating bolt and fed from a detachable 10-round box magazine. To hold the whole thing near the weight of an AK, close to 4.3 kilograms, Dragunov gave it a slender pencil barrel that shaved off every gram it could, chrome-lined inside so corrosion and neglect could not eat it alive. He wrapped it in a distinctive thumbhole stock and vented handguards that would make its silhouette unmistakable for the next 60 years. And then there was the scope, which in 1963 was arguably more advanced than the rifle it sat on. The PS-01 was introduced on the very same day as the SVD, and at the moment it appeared it was very likely the most sophisticated optical sight issued to any army in the world. It magnified only 4 times, and that was deliberate, because a designated marksman needed a wide field of view to find and follow moving men, not the narrow tunnel of a high-power scope. Its etched reticle carried a bullet drop compensator and a stadiometric rangefinder calibrated to the height of an average man, 1.7 meters, so the shooter could bracket a distant figure and read his range straight off the glass. It even carried a small infrared detector screen the marksman could flip into view to reveal the glow of enemy night vision devices that relied on active infrared light. The Soviets had handed their squad marksmen a range computer made of etched glass. They were about to do something no one else in the world had done. By the 1970s, the thing they had done had a name that existed almost nowhere else. The Soviets had created, in fielded form and at scale, the designated marksman. Not a sniper in the Western sense. Not a lone specialist crawling for 2 days to take a single shot, but an ordinary soldier inside an ordinary squad, trained a little better. Handed an accurate self-loading rifle, and told to reach the targets no one else around him could reach. Every motor rifle squad was meant to have one. Where a Western army attached a 2-man sniper team to a company or battalion, when a mission called for it, the Soviets pushed precision reach all the way down to the smallest unit and kept it there permanently, in every squad, all the time. The marksman did not need one impossible shot from a mile away. He needed to drop a machine gunner or an officer at 500 meters, and then do it again a heartbeat later, and the semi-automatic action existed for exactly that. Volume of accurate fire was the point. Perfection was not. Nothing proves that priority more cleanly than what the Soviets did to the barrel in the 1970s. They changed the rifling. Not the profile, the twist, tightening it from 1 turn and 12.6 inches to roughly 1 turn and 9.4 inches so the rifle could properly stabilize tracer and armor-piercing incendiary rounds, bullet types that are longer and need a faster spin to fly straight. The change meant the SVD could now digest the entire family of Soviet 7.62 by 54 mm rimmed ammunition, whatever a soldier pulled from a crate. It also cost the rifle roughly 20% of its accuracy with dedicated sniper ammunition. The men who ran the program knew that number and accepted it without hesitation. Handed a choice between a rifle that shot tighter groups and a rifle that could fire anything in the supply chain, they chose the supply chain. That decision is a fingerprint. It tells you exactly what this rifle was optimized for, and it was never the group size on a paper target. So ask the obvious question. If accuracy itself was something they were willing to trade away, what was the one thing they refused to give up? In 1979, the answer began spreading across the world, because the rifle did. North Vietnamese units had already been fielding SVDs since the late 1960s, but it was the Soviet-Afghan War, from 1979 to 1989, that seared the shape into Western military memory. American and Allied troops learned to recognize that long skeletal outline with the cutout stock, and it collapsed in their minds into a single word: sniper. To a generation of soldiers, and later to tens of millions of video game players who met the name on a screen, the Dragunov was the enemy marksman, the crack from the far ridge, the reason to keep your head down. The reputation ran far ahead of the reality, because this was a squad support rifle with a modest 4-power scope and roughly 1.5 minutes of angle of accuracy, not a precision system. On the battlefield, the distinction did not matter. A Dragunov could reach a man that a Kalashnikov could not, and in a firefight that was terror enough. Then the design slipped its maker's hands entirely. In 1979, the same year the war in Afghanistan began, China fought a brief and bloody border war with Vietnam, captured Soviet-supplied SVDs, and reverse-engineered them into a domestic copy, the Type 79, followed by an improved Type 85. China's state arms giant, Norinco, would sell export versions to anyone who wanted them, including one built for the American commercial market called the NDM-86. Romania fielded a rifle that looked like a Dragunov from across a room and fired the same round, the PSL. But underneath the resemblance, it was something else entirely, an enlarged Kalashnikov mechanism dressed in Dragunov clothing. Not a true copy at all. Iraq built its own version and called it the Al-Qadesi. Iran built one it called the Nakhjir III. Ijevsk itself sold a civilian hunting model, the Tiger, closing a strange circle that had started with a sportsman's rifle in the first place. One weapon from one plant in the Urals had become a sprawling family scattered across continents and ideologies. A rifle can be copied. Anyone with captured examples in a decent machine shop can trace the parts and turn out something close. What is far harder to copy is the idea behind it. The doctrine of putting precision reach into every single squad and building the whole system cheap enough and common enough to actually do it at that scale. And yet that got out too, because the rifle carried the idea with it wherever it traveled. The most telling proof came decades later, when the Western armies that had once seen the Dragunov only as a threat rediscovered the very gap it had been built to close. And in the wars of the 2000s in Iraq and Afghanistan fielded designated marksman rifles of their own. The copies were never a failure of Soviet security. They were proof the concept had won. By the 1990s, with the Soviet Union itself gone, the rifle was doing the thing it had always done best, refusing to die in wars that destroyed better equipment. It served through both Chechen wars, the Gulf War, the wars that tore Yugoslavia apart, Iraq, and later Syria. It worked in the frozen concrete of Grozny, and in the furnace heat of the desert, feeding on whatever standard ammunition a quartermaster could produce, because its acceptance standard had never demanded exotic match loads, only that it group inside about 1.5 minutes of angle with ordinary service rounds, across a temperature range that ran from 40 below to 50 above. It asked for nothing it could not be guaranteed, and so it kept working when finer rifles choked, and the design kept flexing to fit new shapes of war. For airborne and special units who needed something more compact, designers built the SVDS, a shortened version with a side-folding metal stock that could ride in a vehicle or survive a parachute jump. For interior ministry units fighting in the tight geometry of urban rooms and stairwells, they folded the whole rifle backward into a bullpup called the SVU. and it turned up in the hands of Russian police units during the First Chechen War. Later came the SVDM, modernized with a heavier barrel to claw back some of the accuracy the pencil profile had traded away, and a rail for modern optics. Each variant was the same rifle answering a new question. Not one of them managed to replace it, which raises the question that hangs over the whole story by the turn of the century. After 30 years, a dozen wars, and half a dozen redesigns, why had no one, not the Soviets, not the Russians, not any of the copyists, managed to build something clearly better and finally retire the old rifle for good? The answer was never printed on any specification sheet. It was hiding in the one requirement the designers had refused from the very beginning to give up. Here is that requirement, and here is the real reason the Dragunov would not die. The SVD endured not because it was accurate, but because it was engineered to disappear into a system that already existed. And the single most important decision behind it was the one that looks, at first glance, like the most old-fashioned thing about the entire rifle. They built it around the 7.62 by 54 mm rimmed cartridge. That round was already everywhere. It had been in continuous service since 1891, longer than any other military cartridge on Earth. So long that the Russian Empire had once contracted the American Winchester Company to build rifles chambered for it. It flowed through every armory in the Warsaw Pact, and it was already the round feeding the standard Soviet machine gun, the PK. By chambering the new squad marksman's rifle for that ancient round, the Soviets created a precision capability that required no new ammunition, no new factory, no new supply line, nothing at all. The marksman reached into the very same crates as the machine gunner standing next to him. In a real war, that is the whole difference between a capability that exists on a chart and one that actually shows up when the shooting starts. Wrap that one decision in a barrel light enough to keep the rifle near the weight of an AK. Chrome lined so neglect could not kill it, hung on a receiver simple enough to stamp out by the hundreds of thousands, and the SVD stops being a rifle that competes on accuracy at all. It becomes a distribution system for reach, one that plugs directly into a supply chain that was already running at full capacity. That is what the twist rate change proves. They surrendered a fifth of their accuracy so that one rifle could fire ball, tracer, and armor piercing straight from the same pouch as everything else in the squad. Precision was the variable they were willing to spend. Ubiquity was the constant they would not touch. And Dragunov himself would learn that same lesson from the other side of it. Years later, he entered another competition, offering a compact automatic rifle he called the MA into the trials that produced the short Kalashnikov carbine, the AKS-74U. By most accounts, his design performed every bit as well as Kalashnikov's. It lost anyway, and it lost for the exact reason his own rivals had once lost to him, because the Kalashnikov shared parts with rifles already in mass production and his did not. Commonality beat quality. It almost always did. The 1891 cartridge at the heart of his most famous rifle was never a limitation the design was forced to work around. It was the entire point. Everything a Western marksman would call a compromise was, seen correctly, the strategy working exactly as it was designed to. Which is why the rifle is still in the fight right now, in the 2020s, on both sides of the same war. In the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Russian squads carry the SVD in the designated marksman role it was invented for more than 60 years ago, and Ukrainian troops pick up captured examples and turn them straight back around into the identical role. The rifle changing hands across the front line, but never once changing its job. Russia has a proper successor ready to go. The Chukovin sniper rifle, the SVCH, entered mass production in February 2023, designed from a clean sheet to replace the aging Dragunov, offered in the modern 7.62 by 51 mm NATO round, and even in .338 Lapua Magnum for genuine long-range work, capable of reaching well past 1,000 meters. It is, by nearly every technical measure, the better rifle. And yet look at what the successor could not leave behind. In its base form, the SVCH still chambers the 7.62 by 54 mm rimmed, still fires the round from the 1891, and still feeds from magazines compatible with the very rifle it was built to replace. The replacement inherited the exact logic of the original, because that logic was never obsolete. It was the whole reason the rifle worked. And rather than quietly winding the old design down, the Kalashnikov concern reported that it had increased production of the folding stock SVDs by roughly 13 times over the previous year to meet the demands of the war, telling Russian state media that the rifle was in heightened demand at the front line. 60 years after it was adopted, a rifle the world has spent decades calling obsolete is being manufactured faster than it has been in generations. Not as a museum piece, but because soldiers at the front are asking for it by name. The sportsman who built it died in Ijevsk in 1991, the same year the country he built it for ceased to exist. He did not live to see his rifle outlast the Soviet Union, outlast the Cold War it had been designed to fight, and go on being made and carried and fired into a third century of service by armies on both sides of a war he could never have imagined. The rifle that was never the best is still at this very moment being built by the thousand and pressed into hands at the front, precisely because being everywhere and not being the best was always exactly what it was for. So the cartridge from 1891 is still being loaded into a rifle from 1963. Fired in a war in the 2020s by both of the armies fighting it, it has outlived the Tsar who first issued it and the Soviet Union that built the gun around it. And it is not finished yet. If you made it this far, drop 1891 in the comments so I know you stayed to the end. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.